Inaya Folarin Iman is a writer in the UK, freelance writer. She is also somebody who stood in December 2019, the UK general election, for the Brexit Party in Leeds Northeast. She is speaking out now in the UK, basically asking the same thing many of us are asking. Is this really about racism and police brutality, or is there something else going on? She was born in 96. Holy cow. She was born in 1996 in London. She is of Yoruba heritage. She's was raised in a British Nigerian single parent household. Welcome to the program. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm very, very good. Thank you.
So many people call you the Candace Owens of the UK. I've heard that bantied around. Tell me your take on what, I don't know if you take that as a good thing or a bad thing, but we mean it as a good thing. Tell me about what you're feeling.
I take it positively.
Good. On what's happening in Europe. They in the UK, they've just defaced the guy who fought against fascism better than anybody else in the world, Winston Churchill. They just defaced a statue of Abraham Lincoln. What's going on in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I want to say that I think a lot of people for the past kind of few months and even years in particular have been worried about kind of the rise of China and that what implications that has for kind of international politics. But I think that what we've seen in the last week, we can be in no doubt of American cultural hegemony and how kind of American racial culture wars has now been kind of exported globally. Now, I love America. I think it's a fantastic country, but I have actually been surprised to see thousands and thousands of people in Britain, in central London, putting their hands up, saying, hands up, don't shoot, to one of the most demilitarized police forces in the world, which is the British police force.
They don't have guns. How can they shoot? They don't have guns.
Yeah, they don't have guns. So I think what we've seen is a kind of attempt to create this kind of homogenized narrative about what it means to be black in the world, I think, and it's been one that has been essentialized to be one of kind of racism, oppression, victimization, irrespective of the kind of nuances and complexities of specific countries. I think absolutely, racism exists, that needs to be combated, but in response to the George Floyd killing, for the first time in, I think years, there was unity across the political spectrum, pretty much internationally, saying that this was, a wrong thing. And, the man's now been charged and, people can debate about what charge that should be. But at the end of the day, that's on our way to justice. That's a very positive thing. And so what has now transpired to me is something very, very, very different. We are seeing what looks like to me a kind of concerted effort to paint Western society at large as this kind of bastion of evil and hate and kind of racism. And I think it's sending a really toxic and demoralizing message to a generation of young people who haven't had it so better in terms of, racial equality, progress. There's much more to be done, but the narrative that is being told is completely divorced from reality. And I think it's got much darker intentions and kind of consequences unless we seriously grapple with what is happening to our culture.
Can you tell me what you think? Because I agree with you, and everything that you're saying here leads me to the things that we have been investigating for a long time, at least on my program, and that is this concerted effort by a radical leftist group of organizations and people that want to tear down the Western world and capitalism. Do you believe that that's what you're seeing over in the UK as well?
No, absolutely, because, it is something that's not just sparked solely out of the protests. We've seen it in terms of the education system, even in the universities. I think there's a similar thing that's happened in America in terms of these kind of campus free speech wars. We've seen it with the gender debate, and also in the UK, we saw it up until the election. until Brexit, which is essentially overthrowing the democratic system in order to kind of push forward a certain agenda. And I think I don't want to make too many connections, but I do think it's all part of the same underlying ideology that has a deep, bitterful resentment kind of Western society and sees many of these political upheavals as an opportunity to exploit it to kind of push forward a very radical left agenda. And I think it's really worrying. I think, at least in the UK, we have a situation where kind of the Conservative Party won the election, and a lot of us thought that was a positive thing in terms of pushing back against this. But the left, I think, again, it's similar in America, have right now a monopoly on culture. They have very significant sways in terms of the media, and in terms of changing that narrative and reclaiming a kind of more positive and realistic representation of the West, and kind of speaking to the young people that this picture is not actually the reality, is something that is still, there's a lot more work to be done there. So it is really concerning.
So I've recently met the founders and the heads of an organization, Turning Point UK, and I've been really excited to see the ideas of freedom start to take root in a younger generation as well. But it's almost like it's a cute little effort overseas, because you don't have our Constitution and Bill of Rights, and quite honestly, we don't either right now. But so it's a different look at liberty, and it's kind of a hard sell in some ways. How are you seeing the pushback on this globalist, Marxist kind of ideology? Is there growing pushback on that at all?
Well, even in Britain, we don't obviously, as you mentioned, have a written constitution, but we have a really strong and rich tradition of liberty in terms of, John Stuart Mill and kind of the Bill of Rights and the Magna Carta. Right. There's a very rich and kind of amazing tradition there. And I think a lot of that, again, has kind of been brushed to the side and downplayed in this swell of cultural self-loathing, which has really encapsulated many of the left in particular, but a lot in the West. But I think in terms of the pushback, I think it is something that's growing. So I'm part of an organisation in the UK called the Free Speech Union, and we've now been really proactive in terms of trying to defend people that are even facing, losing their job and their positions to simple things that they've said. I mean, even recently in the UK, it's quite horrifying. A gentleman, a radio presenter, is being investigated for criticizing Black Lives Matter. So, it is a really, really serious thing. And obviously, there's a whole situation in terms of the New York Times in America over there. So the pushback is there, but it definitely needs to be much stronger, much more forthright. I mean, if we look at the lockdown, in Britain, I've been quite surprised at how there wasn't that much pushback in terms of the biggest peacetime removal of our liberties. And so I think that a lot of people have felt felt kind of exhausted by the constant barrage of negativity. But I think that what we've seen now, something feels different to me in the UK. Statues, as you mentioned, of Winston Churchill being brought down, historic cultural monuments being defamed, and, violence against the police, and all of these really kind of significant things. I think a lot of people are now waking up and saying that we cannot let this go on, or this is really going to spiral into something much, much darker than it already is.